In the little house where the pixies are dressed uncharacteristically in multiple layers of clothing and woolen wear, winter has properly arrived, and all at once. Her dramatic entrance followed a pleasant day filled with sunshine and the barest breezes, which saw the mercury climb into the low 70s before abruptly changing direction and plunging into the 20s, filling the sky with swirls of dancing snowflakes in her wake. At this point, we recognize that half the country is looking for the news in this story, and that's fair if you live in areas where winter typically deigns to spend more time with you. For those of us in Southeastern Louisiana, however, winter is generally akin to a flaky relative who visits infrequently and rarely puts forth the effort needed to be all she could be while in residence. But this year was different. This year, winter swept into town with a dazzling vibrance and charmed all she met with her engaging personality and her finery. Presumably tired of having refrained from spending any time relaxing by the sea, she swept across the Gulf Coast and hugged the sandy shores with all her wintry wonder. She poured herself into every nook and cranny of the French Quarter, icing the historically iconic scenery with a thick layer of white, and sprawled across the already drooping branches of the live oaks. And the pixies enthusiastically embraced her wholeheartedly, as did the majority of the South. In fact, upon hearing of her imminent arrival, everyone in the little house went to work preparing for her visit, starting with winterproofing the pixie's potager, who is in her typical midwinter stage of neglect after the busy holidays. Leaves that carpeted the paths and surrounding landscape required raking and were used to mulch the garden's beds. The pixies soaked each of their potted trees or plants thoroughly before transferring them into our enclosed storage area and wrapping them with white Christmas lights in the hopes of preventing the cold from being too much for them. Warnings were sent from our energy company concerning the potential for power loss, which we can typically expect if a butterfly sneezes too forcefully near a power line or if it's a random Tuesday. Also, there was the question of mobility, or lack thereof, with the Weather Service anticipating the potential for roads to be slick with ice and under 6 inches or more of snow for days. Obviously, preparing to stay put was best accomplished while Mother Nature was still in a relatively pleasant mood. To this end, tap water, which we ordinarily store in previously used gallon bottles in case we need to flush toilets during the aftermath of hurricanes, were brought into the house, and others were placed in the deep freezer to fill the empty spaces as a precaution against extended power loss. Sourdough loaves were baked, chicken bone broth and dried pinto beans were cooked and canned, while flashlights and lanterns were checked, outfitted with batteries, and set aside, just in case. However, no amount of coaxing budged the feral cat's opinions that we were possible catnappers bent on cat trafficking them, and they refused to cross the threshold of the house. Their low opinions of our intentions towards their furry persons have not prevented the pixies from creating a multi-level first-class hotel for the fuzzy little rebels out of an oversized dollhouse built by the warrior pixie and I years ago for the pixies' dolls, and which has now been insulated and filled with fluffy handmade beds. This establishment happens to also offer meals and treats twice a day, free of charge. But as far as the feline residents are concerned, our clever cover could crack at any moment. Thus, we spent the snow event filling bottles with hot water and placing them into their little rooms, an amenity that they happily accepted. By the time all the winter gear was rounded up, along with blankets being brought out and missing items procured, gas tanks filled, and the generator readied, the pixies were both tired and simultaneously excited for what the Weather Service had assured them would be the snow event of the century. And while the air had gotten bitingly cold, there was still not a single snowflake in sight. That all changed when we rose the following morning to find the world draped in a blanket of pristine snow and the gray sky filled with flurries of delicate flakes. Tightly stuffed into their 3 layers of clothing, copious amounts of socks, heavy coats, scarves, gloves, boots, and hats, the pixies rushed out into the weather to greet the anticipated visitor with all the giddiness of a 3-year-old on Christmas morning. And as the morning passed, it snowed. And snowed. And then it snowed some more. Until the potager was a mysterious stranger, and a measuring stick announced 7 inches of depth had been reached and exceeded. Small breaks from play had to be taken to thaw out feet and fingers while their owners filled up on homemade soup, grilled cheese sandwiches, and hot teas or coffee, before venturing back out into this foreign new world. By nightfall, the already frigid temperatures had settled into the teens, and as the sun rose the following day, the snow had stopped falling as the mercury confirmed we had wandered dangerously close to Arctic weather and then recklessly plunged over the line, forgetting for a moment just who we were. All bridges in the state lay buried beneath more snow than they had ever seen and remained closed for days. Having claim to the longest bridge in the world, continuously over water, is all fun and games until it's unexpectedly covered in a thick layer of snow and ice, and it dawns on everyone that clearing this almost 24-mile-long 4-lane monster is going to take some finessing, and a few days of above-freezing temperatures, which winter was not in a hurry to provide. With most roads impassable, businesses and schools closed through the weekend, and the only sounds to be heard anywhere were the crisp crunching of ice beneath boots and the joyful voices of playing children of all ages. While it is true that Southerners are not terribly familiar with deep freezes holding our states hostage, we do know how to thrive in inclement weather and under harsh conditions. See Southern summer as a reference. And in Louisiana in particular, if we aren't discouraged by 100-mile-an-hour winds and driving rain yearly, and determined mosquitoes of biblical size dressed in striped jammies pursuing us the moment we step out our back doors, well, let's just say a record-breaking snowfall is unlikely to dampen our spirits 21 days into the new year. The pixies set to work creating snowfolk in the yard, rolling and packing the snow until their forms appeared, and dressing them in their own snow gear. The baby cats followed them around curiously, both fascinated and a bit horrified at the cold, white world that had appeared overnight. Not to be deterred by the lack of hills, the pixies managed to sled on almost flat ground, creating runs in the snow, and rigging a slingshot-like sled that they could take turns pulling each other on. Several snow angels were created, and a snowball battle was started, until it was decided that no one really liked being hit by snowballs, bringing the snowball wars to a quick conclusion. If the government needs any help ironing out conflicts on the battlefield, pixies are available for consultation and conflict resolution, which comes down to, if it hurts, stop doing it. In the end, the polar vortex dropped enough snow to exceed Anchorage, New York, and Philadelphia's totals for the meteorological new year. I think it's safe to say no one saw that coming. Over a foot of snow in areas of New Orleans was on few people's 2025 bingo card, and snowmen being lapped at by the Gulf's tide was definitely an outlier. We do get snow periodically, but it is few and far between. And to find the recorded record for snowfall in NOLA, you had to go back 130 years to February 15th of 1895, until 2025 waltzed in and said, "Hold my hurricane," and stole the show. This snowfall tied the earlier record and exceeded it in some areas, at 13.5 inches being the highest reported. Nothing's been particularly normal about this past year in general, and I suspect we may be in for a few other nature-related surprises over the coming year, so perhaps we should all hold on to our seats and keep our arms and legs inside the ride that this year is already ramping up to be. And while we all enjoy a snow day, it may be a good idea for Anchorage to keep a better eye on their weather so it doesn't wander down south a little too often. We already have some pretty confused gators out sunning themselves in an attempt to recover from their near brush with becoming belts and boots. We don't need your big old white bears following your wandering weather down here to our swamps. Things could get complicated pretty fast. We hope you enjoyed today's video, and that if you did, you'll hit the like button and even consider subscribing if you haven't already, as all of it helps us continue to grow. Now go make a pot of your favorite tea or coffee. Grab a fluffy comforter, light a fire, and pour through your seed catalogs anticipating spring. If you live in the South, it could be here in 3 months, or tomorrow. You might as well be prepared. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.